All right, I think it's time to get started. So, welcome everyone. I'm glad you're here. We're going to talk about autonomous teams, and more importantly, we're going to talk about leadership and management of those autonomous teams. So, we're going to share a lot of our own experience with working with autonomous teams, and much of this talk comes from some frustration and our experience as engineering managers and how management has been bashed in the Agile community for a long time. And to us, it's just being able to see the difference that great managers can do in an organization. And we want to share kind of what the effect of that can be.
Yeah, we actually never worked together or anything. We knew each other from conferences. And then Jakob wrote a blog post in February, and I commented on it on LinkedIn, and after half an hour, we're like, we should have a call. And we ended up having calls every week for a long time, and then I'm like, we should do a talk. So here we are.
And so, quick intro to us. So my name is Jakob. You can find me on LinkedIn. I do occasional writing on Medium. They actually changed the logo after I drew this, very annoying. You can send me an email. I am Swedish, but I live here in Copenhagen, and I work for the Danish consultancy company called Kraftwerk.
Yeah, because you have one in, one out. I am Danish, but live in Sweden. You kind of have to do this, otherwise there's not equivalent. So my name is Gitte Klitgaard. I am known as Native Wired in most places as well. It's my company name and my blog name, so my company is me. I also write occasional blog posts. Sometimes I'll have like spitting them out, and other times I won't. I am many things. Last, I was an engineering manager, but agile coach, leadership coach, whatever people need for their company to work. So that's kind of what I am. So we decided to start with what are autonomous teams, because it's something that, there are so many things called this and that, and what is actually the definition of it? When I first heard about this, I didn't even know I was going to be a techie. I was studying economics, and we were learning about organizational theory in the early 1990s. And there was this one car manufacturer who decided, instead of just having people do one thing, we're going to make small groups that, for instance, make a full door, and then they can work together on this. So it's really not anything new. Actually, self-organized, the word is from 1790 by Immanuel Kant, about the nature of living organisms. And since then, it's been used in so many settings. It's used in organizational theory, it's used in biology, and you can get a ton of definitions on it. And some of them match, a lot of them don't. So in Danish, we have a saying, a love child has many names. Kært barn har mange navne. You read about this, you'll be like autonomous team, empowered team, self-organized team, self-directed team. And sometimes you see a definition, it's like, okay, this is what it means, self-governed, blah, 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 and then you'll find another place where it doesn't say that. It said something different. So we're going to use autonomous teams when we talk about it here, and what we mean is a team that is fairly stable. So they've been together for a bit. They have the freedom to do something on their own, but within a frame. And I think very often when I hear about autonomy, it is like we can do whatever. But we exist in a context, it's inside a company, mostly, the autonomous teams I meet. And there are things that just needs to be in place. That can be more or less. Sometimes you have like a lot of choices, sometimes you have less. Like if you're working in the medical industry, there are just things you need to do to have your software approved. So these autonomous teams are there, and then there's a thing, they need to have accountability. And I'll get a lot more back to why accountability is important. But it's important that it's agreed accountability. And some of these teams can work really, really well, and sometimes they pop up. So my first experience with that was when I was working in IBM. And it might sound interesting that you can have autonomous teams in IBM, because it was quite strict then. But the thing you just do is you have a troubled project, and they'll let you do whatever to fix it. So we kind of introduced Scrum. That's when I believe Scrum was the best thing in the whole world. I was a Scrum police. But we had this team, and we were working together, because that's kind of what made sense to us. So I was a tester, so I tested, but I also did the requirements. And some teams were working with, do the requirements, throw it over the wall. Some developer makes it, throw it over the wall, you test it. But we were collaborating. And at some point, we had to become smaller. So our project manager comes in, and he's like, we need to save X money. The only solution I see is that we take someone off the team. But I want to ask you, because maybe you have a better solution. So we spent an hour or so talking about it, and kind of like, okay, we can't see any other solutions. And then a guy said, well, I'm the least versatile, so I'll be the one leaving the team. So within that, we knew we had to save money. We knew, the framing of it, but we were the ones making the decision. So why do you want autonomous teams? So one of it is motivation. When you are autonomous, you can make your own decisions. It is something that can motivate you. I also like to say, I want it because I want all the brain power of people. If you tell people what to do, you're missing out on so many things. Because first of all, they will do what you tell them, and you're just one brain. But also, you might not know enough about what they're doing. So we move the decision power to where the work is actually done. So decision power about the vision will be further up. Decision power about how we actually create the things will be in the team. It also helps build resilience because the team can become more adaptive when they can make their own decisions. They don't have to go up and ask someone far up in the chain if they want to do changes. They can actually do things themselves. And very often when it starts running, they will start supporting each other also in ways that you don't see. And then the question is, should you always have autonomous teams? Is it always worth it? No, it's not. If you want to introduce autonomous teams, it can be really expensive. Because you need to figure out how this works. There's a lot of things you need to try out. You might not produce as much as you would be doing before, or at least not until you get up and running. So you need to consider if this is worth the investment. Sorry. If you have simple, repetitive tasks, you might also not want autonomy. If you have a team of people who don't like to take responsibility, who just want to sit in a corner and code, which luckily we don't have a lot of anymore, autonomous is not going to work because you do need to step up and take responsibility for this to work. So there are many things that needs to kind of be in place. So what things, you ask? I'm glad you asked. I'm just going to use my papers because this is a quote. So this is a quote from the book Leading Without Blame by Diana Larsen and Tricia Broderick. It is not enough to communicate, you are empowered, then walk away. And while this is like, okay, you say it and you walk away, while this is extreme, this is actually what I've seen in a lot of places. Like, you are empowered now, or you are agile now. Companies, for instance, that have been doing agile for a while, they kind of assume that if somebody comes in, like all the knowledge kind of spills over into people by sitting next to each other, like magic. And a lot of people treat autonomous teams that way. Now they know they're autonomous. You are empowered, you can make decisions yourself. Okay, now I'm out. That's not how it works. We actually need 3 basic elements to get this to work. We need a team, obviously. But we also need a team that is willing to take responsibility and to work as an autonomous team, and that are able to. So they need to be able to fulfill the expectations that we have for the team. They need to become aware that they will be more visible. Because if you remove managers, for instance, from the team, the company still wants to know how things are going. The manager still wants to know how things are going. So you need to have much more transparency, and you need to talk about how things are going. Doesn't mean that you need to have big fancy reports. It can be as easy as a traffic light. But you do need to show how things are going, because otherwise people are going to come and have to ask you all the time. So there's a lot of transparency, and there's the part about taking responsibility as well. It also needs a manager. Like Jakob said, in Agile, there's been very much this managers are evil. We do have a lot of managers who are not good managers, some because they don't like it, others because they never had the chance to actually learn how to be a manager. So in this case, you need a manager that is able to support the team. The managers most important thing with autonomous team is setting the frame. What are the expectations to the team? What are the boundaries? What can you decide? What can't you decide? Setting the team, putting the right people on the team, making sure that you're there to support. Because another thing that happens sometimes when you have autonomous teams is, and I've literally heard this, they come and ask for help, like, you fix it, you're autonomous. And as much as we would love the world to be like that everyone can just fix everything, that's not reality. So a big part of the manager is to be supportive, to help people out. Maybe if they haven't worked together as a team before, they need help with that. So there are different skills depending on where you are. And then there's the system. I was listening to Barry O'Reilly's talk yesterday where he said, a system is basically just a bunch of things that are connected. I like that definition. But there's a system around, there's a context around. For instance, there's the code. If the code is not decoupled, it can be super hard to have autonomous teams because the different teams will be stepping on each other's toes. If the organization is not positive to autonomy, that can also be a problem because you need support from the surroundings. For instance, you need that if the team makes the decisions, you don't need someone to come in from the side and try to push things in. I saw that when I was working in Germany. It was like a fairly young company, but the founder had retired, except that he would send emails directly to the developers when he found something that he thought needed improving. So no matter how well they planned and stuff, and how well we thought the plan were going, they would get these small things. It's like, oh, you can't have that. And because he's the founder, we have to do this. So if the organization does not accept this, and you need to get used to that as a team as well, because we like to help each other. And if you have something that you're working on as a team, sometimes you might need to say no to other stuff. And there are plenty of things that can go wrong. We have been in, I don't know how many organizations together, combined, not together. We haven't actually been in an organization together, combined. So we have seen a lot of these things, and leadership. So the reason we kind of started this is because we're super interested in leadership, and in management, which we believe is an important skill to be a good leader, to be a good manager. Sometimes you don't have that. Sometimes you have someone who says, oh, you can be autonomous. But then you don't let them be autonomous. You go and you micromanage, you check if they're doing okay. Oh, that decision is not really good. So like one of the things I've seen a lot is like manager will come with two things and they have to choose. And then sometimes they choose the wrong thing. If you already know what they're supposed to choose, don't give them the choice. If your company says we are going to use this, don't give them the choice of something else. But then there's the other part of it, which is like the hands-off. I'm a leader, people follow me. I don't need to do anything. Also, they're grown-ups. I expect them to be grown-ups, is something that I've also heard many times. So there are things that you can do as managers, as leaders, that will damage the autonomy. There's also the other part of it is if the team does not take leadership. So if the team does not take leadership for what they're working on, for talking about how their project is going or the product they're working on, that can also lead to not having good teams. And then hierarchy. And what we're talking about here is not as much like power hierarchy. But the thing with power hierarchy is that there's abstraction levels. So if you look at the top, which in many companies is like the board, or sadly the stakeholders that want a lot of money. But you have the board, they are a big abstraction level. You have like the C-levels, they will talk about visions and maybe strategy. And the lower you go, the further to the code you go, the less abstraction you will have. So if you don't have these abstraction levels, it can be super hard. One of the things I've seen, for instance, is strategy, is that because you have good intentions, you want everyone to be part of a strategy, you take a strategy seminar, and you take everyone there. And then it's spoken in strategy language, which a lot of board members know, a lot of C-level members know, maybe VPs. But actually, there's not a lot of even managers, first-level managers and developers I know who speak strategy. So somehow you need to have these abstraction levels. I've had some of my developers come to me and almost crying after a strategy seminar because they felt so stupid. And the intention was to make them feel involved. So if you don't have that hierarchy, then it's also going to be super hard to work. Sometimes you'll say, oh, because they're autonomous, they need all the information, and they need all this, and that's not what they need. They need enough so they know the direction, they need enough so they know about the strategy and the vision, but they don't need to know all the details. And then a very classic one, alignment. Very often when you read about this, it's autonomy and alignment. Alignment is often forgotten. And alignment can be anything from, we have marketing campaigns, so some stuff actually needs to be done at a specific time, but people are not told. Or the fact that you have a product that's on the web, on an app, maybe on some sort of device where it's fixed, and it doesn't look the same. Or you don't navigate in it the same way because they're not aligned. So alignment can cause a lot of problems if you don't have it, which Jakob will talk more about.
Yes. So I wanted to share a story from a company where I worked, where we had very autonomous teams. It was great. Developers were loving it. Managers were loving it. We had teams that were autonomous in the sense that they could make almost any decision they needed to make. They had an area that they were responsible for. They had all the people in the team that they needed to be able to make decisions and implement. They had a product manager that would kind of figure out which features to build. They had all the developers they needed. They had testers. They had designers. Everyone needed. The teams were empowered to make any tech decisions they wanted, so they could use any technology that they found suitable for the task. Great. I mean, developers love that, right? It was awesome. And we were set to kind of own our own area and focus on that. And you can say it looked something like this. So if you would put autonomy on one axis, so down here is things are very connected, up there is very free. Alignment on the other axis, where here things are very unaligned, and over here things are very aligned. We were kind of here. So we had silos between the teams. So one of the consequences was we had this one team that were working on something business critical. They had a deadline, there was a campaign, they needed to make that date, and they were really struggling. They were cutting corners, they were working long hours. And over here, there was this team that were working on a new bet. They had no customers yet. They were trying to figure out what to build. Nobody was expecting nothing from them. And they were kind of chugging along. And this was happening at the same time. And never once did we sit down and have a conversation. Maybe we should help each other out to reach this business critical thing. Also, this whole idea of developers and teams making their own tech decisions. So we had a great microservice architecture, but when we stepped back, we realized we had microservices written in F#, C#, Java, Kotlin, Go, and probably something else. That was really becoming a problem. So some developers in one team said, I can't help that other team because that's the C# team, so I'm out, I'm sorry. And we were having a hard time supporting all these microservices. And at some point, the F# guy, and it was actually one guy, he left. And everybody else said, I'm not touching those. That's not going to happen. So it was really a problem, and we needed to be over here, right? We needed to have autonomy, but we also needed high alignment. Now, what we realized is the only way to get there was what I, from now on, will call the dead smiley. We needed to reduce autonomy to get to high alignment. So the way this looked was basically saying, from now on, all microservices will be written in Java. That's it. They will be written in Java. And there was an uproar. The C# developers threatened to quit. It's like, we have to make a decision. We have to be aligned on some of these things. We have to prioritize in the organization. We have to sit down, the managers together, and rebalance and prioritize what is most important for the business. And once we had those things in place, we said, well, now there's a boundary. Now you can be very autonomous within these boundaries. As long as you write the microservice in Java, you can still make a lot of decisions and a lot of tech choices within that realm. And to get to this, you also need a certain type of leadership. And so I'm using the book here. There's a book called Leadership Agility by Bill Joyner and Stephen Josephs, and you'll get a reference at the end. And they talk about, they actually have 5 different types of leadership. I'm going to dig into 3 here because I think they're representative. So the first one is the expert leader. Now, we all know the expert leader. We've all worked for them. It's the great developer that gets promoted. It's that brilliant data scientist that's doing great work, and then they get a team. And usually this is kind of how people start out in management. And what they do inherently, what you kind of want to do is you say, I know the best way to build this. So I'm going to duplicate myself, and I'm going to make all these other people work in the way that I think is the best, because obviously I was promoted because I'm an expert in this field. And so I know the solution, the manager knows the solution, and I will make others follow my instructions. This is a very common type of management. I've had managers like this.
And it might not even be conscious that you think like this. It's just how you've been, that's what you did. And you continue to do what you know. Unless you actively make a decision to change, you will just continue to do what you're used to.
And the next iteration of this, and I'm sure you've met this as well, is the achiever leader. So the achiever leader kind of sets a goal. I'm going to set a goal, and I'm going to rally people towards that goal. So the language here is, I'm going to motivate people to reach that goal. We're going to align. We need buy-in. Like, you know, you've been here. We want to get people to reach this goal. But I, as a manager, choose that goal. I make a diagnosis, and I'm going to choose that goal. And I'm going to measure the results. And this is a very competitive thing, right? My team is going to be the best, and we're going to reach that goal. That's usually the language around here. Now, these 2 types of leadership is called heroic leadership. So the manager in this situation is a hero. Without the manager, there's nobody to set goals or know the solution. But this is also the managers that are always stressed, can never go on vacation because nothing works without them, and they always have to be there. And it's not to say that this type of management is bad. Actually, I would say in the book they say this is like 80% of all management is expert or achiever management. It works well in some specific situations, but it doesn't work very well if you want autonomous teams, if you want other people to make decisions. If you want that, you need another type of leadership. So in the book, they call it the catalyst leader. So what is the catalyst leader? Well, the difference with the catalyst leader is they focus on the whole system. They focus on the whole thing that the team works in. In systems thinking, you often talk about don't manage the work, don't manage the people, manage the system. So they focus on things like culture, experimentation, facilitating processes and meetings. They don't know the solution, and they're very aware that they don't know the best way to build something. But their work is to help the team find that best way, accept failure on the way, have long-term thinking, and promote collaboration. There's another book, Liz Wiseman, that writes. The book is called Multipliers. The author is called Liz Wiseman. And she writes about this multiplier effect that catalyst leaders have. So basically, their job is to make other people's great. They shouldn't be the smartest person in the room. They should work in a way that others can grow and make decisions that they could never make. That's their job. And if you want autonomous teams, that's the type of leadership you need. Now, it's not that type of leadership does not come easy. It's actually really, really hard. So as Gitte mentioned, you need a team and you need a manager. We all know that. But you need a certain team for autonomous teams to work. I don't know if you've ever been in an organization that tried to build an autonomous team of junior developers. It does not work. You need a team that has experience. You need a team that has expertise, that knows what great looks like. You need a team that kind of understands the full system. They need to have the competence and skills to be able to kind of solve the tasks, solve the problems. And I'm sorry, if you're a developer that I just want to code, being in an autonomous team is probably not for you, because you need to understand so much more. And you need to participate and own so much more than just solving this coding problem. The manager, on the other hand, they need some kind of systems thinking. They need to focus on something that's bigger than just a team. The manager's work in this context is making sure that the team has the right competence, making sure that the right people is on the team, and that the wrong people is off the team. They need to reduce the cognitive load of the team. Things like organizational design and helping the team focus on their tasks. And they need to lead that system. So you could say that, as Gitte mentioned about the hierarchies, the managers are the ones that take strategy into action. So basically, they need to understand the whole strategy and what's happening in all those layers above them and take that into action. If team members can do that, that's fantastic, but that's the manager's job. They should spend hours of understanding and working with strategy. And doing this is not easy. All of these things that I just mentioned, these are skills that don't come naturally. And these are not skills that you get by being a great developer. These are skills that you learn over time. And when people say that leadership is a soft skill, I get rashes. Because in that inherently, it's like, it's a soft skill, you can, whatever, you're the leadership thingy, everybody can lead someone. You can I'll just appoint you, you'll just get the sheriff star and that's fine. To me, leadership is a hard skill, or a difficult skill. It's something you have to learn, train, and be better at. And so I wanted to share another story here about accountability, because that's also one of the big topics here, and Gitte will dig into it, but I just want to share a story of another organization where I was working with a manager and his team. And this team also got a deadline that they needed to reach. In some management meeting, it was said, this team is going to build this feature and has to be ready by this date. And so the manager came to me and said, look, this is really a stretch. I'm really frustrated with this team. They don't own their problems. They have no accountability. And we need to reach this. Can you help them create a plan? I said, sure. So we sat down with the team and said, all right. They straight out said, this is impossible. And said, okay, so let's create a plan that you believe in, and let's slice it in such a way that we can show them what scope we will deliver by that date and when we will deliver the rest of the scope. Fine, we did a plan, and the team looked each other in the eye and said, look, it's a stretch, but we can do this. We can do this. It's not the full scope, but it's something valuable at this date. And so we went back to the manager with this plan and presented it to him, and he got furious. Totally unacceptable. He'd already promised that he would deliver this full scope. So what did he do? As any good manager, he went in and he changed the plan. So he took the plan, changed it so that the plan would contain the full scope by the end date, presented it back to management. Now, did this team feel accountability for that plan? Not at all. They were so demotivated that they were just chugging along and doing things. They did not reach the plan because they already knew from the outset that the plan was a failure. So they had nothing to push for. There was nothing to reach. And this brings me to accountability.
So accountability has kind of become a little bit a dirty word because it's bad. Except that at leadership, especially at the higher up you go, we want the teams to take accountability. We want them to be accountable. And accountable has kind of been used a little bit as, who do we blame when things go wrong? Sometimes we even talk about single ringable neck. Who's accountable for this? And I think this is super sad because accountability is something we really need. So thank you to Jakob for drawing what I want. I often talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. It is a movie from 1966. It's really long and boring. If you want to watch Clint Eastwood, you should watch something else. But they do have this, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And what we very often see in our industry is the bad accountability. people are being told what they are accountable for. Now, your team, you are accountable for this, or a person or a role, you are accountable for this. And very often, what it does mean is that we will punish you if it doesn't work. The ugly is they don't tell you and punish you anyway. So what we want is good accountability. And good accountability is something that we agree on, where we discuss what are the things, for instance with the team, what are the things that the team is responsible for. And there might be some things that they have to be responsible for. So for me, accountability is an agreement where responsibility is what you take as an individual. And there are like two parts of accountability, and we very often talk about the first one, about taking that responsibility. Or rather, we don't talk about that. We talk about accountability, but a lot of people don't even know what it means. But it's something we need, at least a lot of leadership things or management things we do. And a lot of developers I meet and development team thinks, oh, we don't want that, it's a dangerous thing. But really what it's about is about taking responsibility. If you want a team to become autonomous, if you want to be autonomous as a team, you need to take responsibility for some things. Because if the manager takes a step back, there are still things that need to be done. And if you don't take responsibility for that, it falls to the ground. We also don't want the other, like what I said with the hands-off leadership. What I've seen also sometimes is that, oh, this is an autonomous team, they can do everything. So we're going to have them do all the onboarding, we're going to have them do recruiting and all these things. And sometimes I wonder, like, when are they actually going to produce something? But figure out, what is the responsibility and agree on this. And then there's the other part, which I rarely see. Accountability is not just about taking responsibility, it is also about giving account. Where are we at? How far are we? So for instance, if you are a manager of an autonomous team, it would be good for you to know, do I go offer my help? And I'm not saying big reports. If you have a tool, maybe you can be able to do it in that tool. Maybe you just have a board where you have red, green, and yellow. Of course, it needs to be a safe environment where you can actually put it in red, and not where you have it in green until the day before you deliver, where you put it in red. But having signals about how things are going. I've done it like with follow-up of OKRs. Have a simple thing. Green, we still think we can reach it. Orange, yellow, nah. And red, no, we're not going to reach it. And part of that giving account is also what creates the autonomy, because then people can help you. But if you go in and overrule it, like Jakob said, like you change the plan, you condition teams to learn that they cannot make decisions. You just go in, you overrule them. And then the next time when they make a decision, maybe they do it a few times, but soon they will learn that you don't make decisions because it doesn't matter.
And in a relationship between a team and a manager, you really need the transparency of work. You need the transparency of the data for this to work. So you can't have either the manager hogging part of the information around what is happening, or the team hogging part of that information. You need the transparency for the team to be able to take that accountability.
So one of the things that can go really wrong is the forced accountability, where you push something on a team without actually discussing, is this something you're able to take on? Is this something you're willing to take on? So there are some things to look out for as a team if you want to be autonomous, because that's also a decision you need to make. And the first one is, if there's forced accountability, if you are forced to take accountability, responsibility for something you don't feel like you can lift or that you don't want to, that's a sign that there's something going on that's not right. The micromanagement, going in and kind of deciding, okay, you're autonomous by doing this goal and these things and these elements, and you decide how you type it. Or the other one's kind of like, hands off. We're not going to do anything. And an important part, for instance, of a manager is to have, to formulate the vision. Where are we going? So that the team knows that's the direction we go in, so they can make decisions based on that, or based on the strategy. I have to look up because I can't remember the order of them. The lack of support, that's also a little bit the hands-off. if you have a team who's never worked together before, or who has worked like a group of people, which often teams are, they just work on their own stuff and they sit in the same place and we call them a team. Sometimes they even deliver the same things, but they're not actually collaborating. They might need help to learn how to collaborate. They might not have all the competences that they need right now. So they might need to have some training, or they need to be mentored in some things. They are humans. Humans need attention as well. They need that support. And part of what a really good manager skill is empathy, which can also be learned, by the way. And the decisions are overruled. You are allowed to make these decisions if you choose the right ones. And I've seen this in countless companies. I've even tried it myself. It's like, yeah, you have mandate to make decisions, and then you make the decisions. Go like, no, not that one. And it's not good. Like this. And the surroundings are not respecting the autonomy. So I talked before about like the founder coming in and saying something. Maybe you go like, oh, we need incident handling as well, but you also need to do all this other thing. If that is not like built into the accountability and the autonomy, that's also a sign where you should do something. Having higher expectations than the skill and competencies. Like Jakob said, if you have a team of junior developers, because to admit, like when you go to university school, wherever you learn to code, you usually don't learn how to collaborate. You learn one way of doing things and you often do it on your own. There are universities, like I come from Aalborg University, where people work in teams. 2/3 of the semester is actually working together, implementing something. But in general in the world, that's not something. So there are a lot of things you need to learn when you come out. And of course, you should have some juniors on the team, because otherwise we're just going to have senior teams and we don't have anything to put in the pipeline when the old ones die. And they will, eventually. Maybe because they don't behave, but that's a different story. So if the expectations are too high, and you can't fulfill these things, that's also a sign that maybe you should start thinking about, is this a good place for you? Is this the right things? The lack of direction. Very often, teams are told to do something, but not why. And if you are very far from your product in some way, it can be super hard. I was a consultant in Spotify at some point, and I was working with the team who creates the rules. So, like, which country can you play things in? There are artists that want their records played in a specific order. There are so many things there, and having a vision of we want X million more users combined to we want to make these rules can be super hard. So you need someone who's actually able to see, like, okay, what is your function in this? What are you contributing? And it might not be connected to, like, we want more users, but it could be connected to, we want something that's more stable. We want to make sure the right people get the right money. But there needs to be something like that. There needs to be a why. And a why is a big part of the motivation. Google did a project in 2016, I think it was, called Project Aristotle, where they looked into what makes a high-performing team. And one of them is actually that you know what you contribute. Psychological safety was the biggest one, but knowing what to contribute and being accountable was also one. It's called something else, but it's basically about the team tells how far they are, they take responsibility for things. You can count on them that if they commit to something, they will either do it or tell you. So a lot of the things that they found with high-performing teams is actually things that would also work if you just want autonomous teams. ITM, which means immorte, which means and shit. I like it. I don't get to use it in conferences very often. So should you do something about this? And we have the lovely answer, it depends. Do you care? Do you actually care about if you're an autonomous team? Maybe you don't, as a team, as an individual. Maybe it's not important to you. Maybe you're fine how things are going. I mean, things are going fine, I get my salary, we're producing stuff, I'm good. I get to use F#. If it's like that, no, you shouldn't do anything. Is it worth it for you? Is it worth it for the company to go in and change these things? Maybe, maybe not. But go in and have these thoughts and figure out what does it mean to you. And like at the moment, for instance, Sweden, where I live, we are now the third highest unemployment rate in Europe. So we have just surpassed Italy. So now it's only Spain and Greece that have higher unemployment rate than Sweden. So if you live in Sweden, this might not be a time to leave a company. So there are things that you need to take into consideration. Like, I am single, I don't have kids. Jakob has wife and kids, and we have different priorities. I can live on a couch for a very long time, as long as people feed me.
My kids wouldn't accept that.
No, you see. So you need to take different things into consideration. And then there is the thing, sadly, that if you have a bad system, it beats having a good team. If you have a system around it, including the manager, if it's not a good manager, or if it's just a good manager, not a great manager, maybe this is not going to work. And so I was talking to Andrew, who's been doing a few talks, and he said, what did he say? From people becoming a leader till the first training, on average, it's 10 years. 10 years. And there are so many things you need to be able to do, have difficult conversations, conflicts, go into the system. So if you had that system, maybe you can't do anything about it. But maybe you can. So what can you actually do? A lot more than you think. This is something I've been working very actively with over the last 10 years, is helping people see that you have a lot more options than you think. You have a lot more influence than you think. I know a lot of people see like, yeah, but I'm just a developer or designer in a team. I don't have influence. Yes, you do. So if we look at influence, we have things we can control ourselves. Those are the things where we have all the power to control things. Like right now, I'm taking a step to the side, that's my control, nobody else. There are things we can influence. Like if I step too close to Jakob, he will fall off. And you can actually influence a lot more things than you think. Let's say you're a team and you're dependent on another team, so you have to wait for them. And you'll go, I can't do this, the other ones are late. One thing you could do as a team is go to the other ones and saying, you know what, we need that part. Is it possible that you can make that part first? Or you could say, we see that you're struggling with this. Would you like to borrow some developers for a while? Making that decision as a team. So you have a lot more influence than you think, and you can actually push things a lot more. And then, of course, there's the rest. Like before Corona, they'll be like, we cannot work remotely, it's not possible. Kaboom, now we can do it. But we have no control over things like that. So there are things you can't control. But just know that there's so much more in influence than you think. Queue management.
Yeah, so this model is actually the reason that I went into management. So I was working as an Agile coach, and I was coaching managers and I was coaching teams, and I was very frustrated about, I knew what needed to get done, I just had to talk a manager into it. And then finally I became a manager, and looking at this model, my circle of control grew, and my circle of influence grew with that. And over time, they do. Over time, they grow even more, because the more you can control, the more you can do, the more you will be able to influence. And the same thing goes if you have a team that you can control or influence that team to work in a specific way, you're going to influence the teams around you. And things will spread in your organization. And that's usually, in my opinion, that's usually the best way change happens.
They still need help. It's not going to happen by magic, just say. The other thing is you always have a choice. I've been working, like I said, I've been working a long time with people in a lot of different companies. And there's often this, I don't like my work. And then you have three choices. I don't think complaining is a choice. You can leave the company, you can accept it, or, what's the last one? Leave it, accept it, or?
Do something about
it. Do something about it. You have that choice. And what I've heard very, very often, even when, you could step outside as a developer and get a job in the next street, I can't quit my job. I can't afford to quit my job. But the truth is, you cannot afford to quit your job and still go to Thailand twice a year if you don't get a job right away. Or you might not be able to buy the luxury food or go out every day. But we very often have a lot more choices than we think. But we might not like the consequences. Like I said, in Sweden we have a high unemployment. The consequence of leaving your company could be that you literally can't pay your mortgage or you can't feed your kids. There are things like that. That's not a good consequence. But sometimes we don't make that choice because we don't even consider the consequences. And the fact that people with a high income say, I cannot quit because I can't survive, that's not true. People survive on a lot less. And maybe you don't need the newest gadget or the newest phone. And there's actually a lot of things you can do. But in general, in many, many things, or in everything I would say, you have a choice. And what I encourage people to do is to make it an active choice. Because then you decide yourself, what is the consequence I can live with? Sometimes in companies I see, they push things, they want things fast, and quality often suffers. But very rarely do I see that as an active choice. It's very rare that a company says, okay, we're going to deliver this on time, and we know the quality is going to be bad. It's kind of like they think again, magic, think again, if we just get this done, the quality is going to be magic. We have good developers, everything's fine. So the only time I've actually seen this done was with Danske Bank, when they put up mobile pay, which is a payment method, that way you can pay on your phone. They made an active decision to put it out with a bunch of bugs, because they wanted to be the first on the market. And interesting enough, they are now the only one on the market. Because it took like 6 months before some of the other banks came out with a solution. And that was a very, very active choice. We are going to fix things as we go along. But I almost never see this. It's more that we take this choice about being faster or fewer teams or more scope, and then quality happens. So, we would like to kind of have a call for actions. Know the frame as a team. Know the alignment. Know who you need to align with. Know the direction and the purpose of what you're doing. And if you don't, maybe you can help find them. If you don't know the purpose of what you're working on, challenge your manager, challenge the organization. What is the purpose of what we're working on right now? What is the direction we want to go in? Who do we need to align with? For instance, the thing about marketing, maybe you don't know that there's actually a marketing campaign. So you need to know these things, but you can also help out. You can ask questions.
So you can show up and contribute. So I've always learned that you can lead from any chair. Wherever role you have an influence, and you're going to make a decision. You're going to make your actions are going to influence how the team works. And when the team starts working a certain way, you're going to influence other teams. So really show up and contribute. And then take responsibility for the situation that you're in. Own the problems that you get. The worst thing you can say in this situation is, it's not my job. That's not going to build a great teamwork. So take responsibility for the problems that you're served, and start doing. I always say, if you want to become a manager, start doing the job of a manager. Don't wait to be appointed. And that's kind of what you can do here. You can start doing the things that you believe are right. But as you do this, stop and evaluate continuously. See these things as experiments. Try things out. But figure out if they're working or not. Just as any experiment, have a hypothesis and do something and then see the result. But continuously evaluate, and you'll find what works and what doesn't work.
This is also a good idea, even if you're not an autonomous team. Very often when we have things without a deadline, we just continue. And sometimes we realize at some point something happened along the way. When did I went from a super enthusiastic programmer to being a grumpy man in the corner complaining about all the young developers? How did that happen? So stop on regular basis, also as a manager, very important as a manager, and do the reflection.
And then, we've said it a few times already, use your influence. It makes a difference.
So, wrapping up, autonomous teams is an investment. And it might not be worth it. you will need to have an investment in your company if you want to make autonomous teams. And it might not even be possible.
And autonomy and accountability really pair up. They go together. And you can't really have one without the other. So make sure they're both present in the system that you work.
You need really mature and skilled teams. Doesn't mean you can't have any juniors, but as a whole, you need a mature team.
And you need a mature and skilled manager for this to work.
Again, you need to support people, and there's a lot of skills involved in this. And it's difficult.
Yeah, and remember that management is a skill. Management and leadership, they are skills. So if you don't have a mature and skilled manager, you can train, you can have experience, you can have coaching, you can have all these things because it's a skill, it's a muscle that you can train just as anything else.
And no matter what you think about things that are like, oh, you can't train that, like I said, empathy. Some people think you can't train empathy. But you can actually. I have a lot of good exercises on empathy. I have got a lot of good exercises on courage. But there are a lot of the other soft skills, like having a difficult conversation, having a healthy conflict, before it becomes a big conflict and you start fighting. And most importantly, you always have a choice. Always.
So leaving you off with a few references, these are some of the books that we actually reference in the talk. There's so many books on this topic. If you want more books, send us an email or something, we'll happily share. Here's a picture of a unicorn, because Gitte said we need to have a unicorn in the presentation, so there's one now. There's the blog post that I wrote that began our conversation. Gitte has since also written a great blog post on authentic leadership. And
please come talk to us. We're going to be here for the rest of the day, but also we are super interested in this, and we like, at least I like very much to talk. So if you're in Stockholm, let's have coffee. If you are not, let's have virtual coffee. If you want to know more about these things, ask, write us emails.
Yeah, if you're in Copenhagen, you can have actual coffee with me, and otherwise I'm also up for virtual coffee. So.
Yeah. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
I'm not got time.